Well, folks, welcome to one more edition of Politics and Random. Egberto Willis, your host. Thank you so kindly for being a part of the show. We are going to have a great show for you today. Yes, yes, yes. You know, good minds think alike. Good minds think alike. You know, El Señor Rodnin starts the thing with the Freudian slip. But before that, let me salute our wonderful people that are already here in the room. Melanie Keelan. Yes, it's good evening, everyone. Welcome aboard, Melanie Keelan. Alistair Waters is in the house. Alistair Waters is in the house. We have E2247 and of course the one and only Brigitte CP. Welcome to Politics Done Right, my dear beautiful ladies. As well, we have AVQ. AVQ, ¿cómo estás? And those that are not on yet, we have so far quite a few on YouTube. Give us that thumbs up before you leave or get started. Also, if you want to, click that join button and become a part of the YouTubepedia posse. Those of you on Facebook, give us that like. Those of you that are on Twitter, please remember to follow Egberto Willis at Egberto Willis. We need to keep those followers coming. We need to keep all these social media partners working together because that is how the truth is going to get out, my dear brothers and sisters. Anyhow, let's start with us. Let's see if anybody else came in. All right, let's go ahead and start with, I think I called out Alistair Waters. Did I call you out? Want to make sure that I did. There you go. All right, we got Freudian slip. Bush decries invasion of Iraq, not Ukraine. Former U.S. President George Bush appears to admit the 2003 invasion Iraq was wholly unjustified, brutal in a speech about the Russian war. And I got the video. I'm going to show that to you guys in a little bit. George Bush Iraq war gaffe sparks war criminal debate. Not a gaffe, an admission of guilt. Shall we hold a mirror up to ourselves and see that the manufacturing of consent is the same for every war? We should. Thank you for showing that up. We also have an anti-corruption candidate was slated to win. Cleaning was attacked by foreign dark money pouring in media ads. And now the race is too close to call. I think that's the one. Yeah, big money corrupting politics is the underlying problem with our representative democracy, but it's gotten even worse as it's not just corporate power trying to grease the wheels, but foreign influence as well. Summer Lee, I saw that, but I think she's going to pull it out. She's up by 500 votes. The United Democracy Project, a super PAC for the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, poured millions to defeat Lee in a Pennsylvania House primary. Similar dark money. Folks, this is a war against progressives. That's all it is. The trailer, The Empire Strikes Back, a wave of PAC money buries left-wing Democrats. Summer Lee got a head start on her run for Congress. She announced early, hinting that she'd run for the new Pittsburgh-based 12th congressional district even before Representative Mike Doyle, Democrat PA, decided to retire. She racked up endorsements, union locals, 14 of her colleagues in the state legislature, Pittsburgh, first black mayor and Senator Bernie Sanders, Justice Democrats, the group that recruited Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to run for Congress, saw her as a future member of the squad. The attacks did come, TV ads and direct mail, with millions of dollars behind the efforts portraying Lee as a risky left-winger who would undermine the Democratic Party if she won the safe seat. The Democratic majority for Israel poured in $400,000. United Democracy Project, a PAC funded by the Fears, spent more than $2 million in a congressional race, people. Do you see the fear that these people have on progressive? Because progressives really represent you. Not only you, progressives, we represent Democrats, Republicans, independents, everybody. That's why they are scared, because the policies progressives stand for are the policies that the plutocracy fears the most. Anyhow, let's go to the president's gaffe, and then we're going to do the interview with the interview, and then we'll back out of that again. So here is the el gaffe del presidente, que tú sabes cómo va todo. Yvette Avery Herod, welcome to Politics Done Right, my dear friend. Welcome to Politics Done Right. And para ver, here we go with that gaffe. Bush had a Freudian slip. Check this out. We'll take it on the other side.
In contrast, Russian elections are rigged. Political opponents are imprisoned or otherwise eliminated from participating in the electoral process. The result is an absence of checks and balances in Russia and the decision of one man to launch a wholly unjustified and brutal invasion of Ukraine. correct. Anyway, 75.
Now, that's why you have to be careful when you're pointing. You heard what he said? I'm 75. But I thought he said semper fi, but it's 75 that after kind of listening a bit deeper, it seems like he said I'm 75. Okay, let's go ahead and get busy with the interview, and then we'll take it on the other side. So here's Charlotte Dennett. She's going to talk about the Iraq War and what's really behind, not Iraq War. Here I made the same mistake. The Ukraine War and what's behind that war. So let's go ahead and get busy with Mademoiselle Charlotte Dennett. And let me make sure I have her queued up. Here we go. Welcome to one more edition of Politics and Random. Berto Willis. Today we have the honor of speaking to Charlotte Dennett. Who is Charlotte Dennett? Charlotte Dennett is the Beirut-born daughter of America's first master spy in the Middle East, Daniel Dennett. She is an investigative reporter and the author of the best-selling book called Follow the Pipelines. Again, I repeat, follow the pipelines. With what's going on in Ukraine, we're going to have a lot to talk about. Charlotte Dennett, welcome once again to Politics and Right. How are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing great. Great to be on your show.
Well, look, it's great. It's great to have you. Anyway, first, before we get started, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm an investigative journalist and author of 3 books. The latest one, Follow the Pipelines, and I'm an attorney. I'm an attorney to pay the bills. If you're an investigative journalist, you sure aren't going to count a lot on bringing in a lot of money unless you're super famous, of course. So you need 2 professions in order to carry on your passion.
Well, you know what? It seems like you have a good one here, especially with what we're going through with Ukraine. So let's get started this way. Russia decides to invade Ukraine. In your humble opinion, without first going into the pipeline thing, what's the real genesis of that war? And let me just warn you, I had a Ukrainian citizen on one of my shows a couple of weeks ago who pretty much says Russia is all to be blamed. We have always been an independent republic with our own history, and the Russians just came to be a part of us because of invasive history. That's the genesis of that's a synopsis of what he said. What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm still boning up on the whole history of Ukraine, but I can tell you that there's a long history between Russia and Ukraine, and which is why Russia is trying to recapture it. But that's not the only reason. I am looking at that whole war through the perspective of it's being an energy war. And from that perspective, I would refer people to a Rand Corporation study that was published in 2000, and it's about Ukraine and natural gas. And what that story says is that Ukraine has a good amount of natural gas, and we need to develop it as a way to wean the world or Europe off of Russian natural gas. And the whole thing sort of
wait, let me I need to stop you there. I need to stop you there because you just added a perspective that I never ever had. I think you're telling me that the reason we've gone in all hog with Ukraine is you're saying that Ukraine has gas that to date is unexploited, and that we want to be the one to exploit it, but Russia wants to go in there to be the exploiter. Is that correct? Am I understanding your
it's close.
Okay.
It's very close. Ukraine has the second largest natural gas deposits in Europe, but they're unexploited. But that explains this whole rush into Ukraine. In 2014, there was a lot of commotion in there, and eventually a pro-Russian president was removed by the CIA, and
I remember that.
yes, and eventually replaced by Zelensky. But here's the Rand report. This is Ukraine and the Caspian, 2000. This is before Bush starts doing all his stuff in that area. And in fact, Dick Cheney, head of Halliburton, was very interested in Ukraine and the Caspian Sea. And the Caspian Sea was looked upon also as a great reservoir of natural gas. And the whole idea was to get away from the dependency on Middle East oil because there was too much conflict. And you know, oil cannot be exploited and pipelines can't be built. They can't
If
be
they're blown up.
financed
Yeah.
if there's a conflict going on. So they started to look to other places. And so Ukraine was looked at way back in 2000. Now, let's just come up to 2014. No, let's not do that. I'm sorry. We have to go even further back. This is how we uncover the origin of a crisis. You go back in history, and what I do is I keep going back to find the origin. The dissolution of the Soviet Union in the 1992, there was a promise made by the United States that if the Soviet Union was dissolved and the former Soviet republics were to go independent, NATO would not advance toward the Soviet Union 1 inch. They broke the promise. And that has now been well established. NATO has moved in on all these different countries and gotten closer and closer to the border with Russia. So there are those
I need to pause you right
yeah.
there. And the pause goes as follows. I've heard that as well, but I don't know the history. Was that something that's documented, written, or was that verbal agreements?
It was a written agreement.
Okay.
And I believe James Baker, he was former, what was he, Secretary?
He was the Secretary of State for George Bush.
Yeah, he made that promise and broke it. And so when people say that this is an unprovoked war, that's what they say in the United States, that is not really true. It's not it is a provoked war in many people's opinion. And in fact, there were warnings by State Department officials that if NATO powers continue to encroach further closer to the Soviet Union, Russia, there's going to be a problem, as it turns out. Now, this does not necessarily justify the aggression that Russia did or the brutality of the attacks.
And I must pause you there. I must pause you there again too, because in telling these stories as an independent journalist myself, what I like to make sure to do is provide context. Independent nations should have the independence to associate with anyone they want to associate. Do you agree with that, though,
yes,
right?
Yes,
okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And so Russia, by invading, violated the territorial integrity of Ukraine. But people also need to realize that before he invaded, he kept asking for for NATO assurances that first of all, that they were not going to take in Ukraine as part of NATO. He wanted those assurances, and the assurances were not given. So he is going to go around and claim, once people have some historical context, he's going to try to justify what he did. In my humble opinion, I see a plague on both their houses, because what I see this as a energy war, first and foremost.
I want to, first of all,
two superpowers.
I'd like to exploit that with you, or rather explore that with you. But what I want to remove from the context, in my opinion at least, is that whatever, that in another country wanting to become in alliance with another should not be an excuse for any other country to invade the other. I mean, let me also tell you though, America behaves the same way, because again, when Russia was attempting to come to put their stuff in Cuba, if you will, we didn't like them coming to Cuba. We didn't. In fact, I think we have something called where we have dominance over the American hemisphere, if you will. So, I mean, I'm not saying that America would not behave that way, but I think both America and Russia, in my opinion, would be wrong if they're the ones that are saying you can't be allied with X, Y, and Z. But
Yeah.
so, all right. So let's go ahead and talk about the gist of your book, however, which has to do a lot with this being an energy war, or this imply that this is an energy war with pipelines, etc. Why don't you make that case?
Well, I have been tracking pipeline wars for decades, and that goes back to the role of my father for the Central Intelligence Group, immediate predecessor to the CIA, when he was sent into Saudi Arabia. If I can just give you a little bit of this
Sure.
historical context, it will explain how I got to Ukraine very briefly. His role was to determine the route of the Trans-Arabian pipeline. And this was in 1947. And his mission was to figure out what its route was going to be, because it was going to travel overland and have a terminal point on the Mediterranean Sea. And either the terminal point was going to be Palestine, interestingly, or Lebanon, which was right next door. And the more I looked at it, I also had my father's last report before he was killed, and I'll get to that briefly, and his last letter home. And from his last report, I learned there was a tremendous amount of intrigue going on at the time. America, by virtue of it having an exclusive concession of Saudi oil, was becoming a superpower in the Middle East and
Right.
also in the world. And America's wartime allies, the French and the British, were very concerned about this because they had had a monopoly of control over the Middle East, particularly the British. But the French, they had control of Lebanon and Syria, for instance. British had control over Palestine, Jordan. So there was a lot of intrigue. And I learned from declassified reports, because I sued the CIA, that my father's job when he was sent over there in 1944 was to, quote unquote, protect oil at all costs. That is a very important sentence, because it gets applied over and over and over again during the Cold War, going all the way up to the endless wars in the Middle East. So once I had learned that, and that my father was spying on our allies, then I began to understand the great game. And it's a ruthless game, and it's all about getting control of oil. So, and why control of oil? Because oil is the fuel of the military, which most people are not told or reminded of. Even now with this Ukraine situation, you'll see all sorts of maneuverings with who's going to get natural gas and who's going to get access, but they don't say that oil is the fuel of the military. And when you, and the thing about the Ukraine war is what had once been hidden from view, censored out, is pretty blatant now. I don't think many people would dispute with me that energy security has something to do with this war. But still, when you see the black billowing smoke coming out of oil depots that were hit and refineries that were hit, that's because it is a military target and it's going to hurt either side's advances. Which it did. And in fact, that convoy of troops,
they were stuck because they were out of oil. Yeah,
they ran out of oil. Now, what every major power knows is that Germany lost World War I and World War II because their military ran out of gas. Can you believe it? That's what happened. So that's why this is so intense, and it's still going on. And the other thing that brought me to Ukraine, because from the Trans-Arabian pipeline, which I followed up to the endless wars, I found pipeline connections to the wars in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and Yemen, and I can elaborate. But getting to Ukraine, one of the first Russian-owned projects that was sanctioned by the US was a major pipeline. It's called the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. and it has been completed after many efforts by the U.S. to prevent it from happening. And it is to carry natural gas under the Baltic Sea and going to Germany. And from there, it would be distributed. The reason the US didn't want that is because that would have made Europe even more reliant on Russian natural gas. And so America's role in all of this thing is to weaken Russia and wean Europe off of its dependence on natural gas. And that is all very well documented. So having looked at what they did with Nord Stream 2, then I looked at all these maps. Maps are very crucial. And if you go to my website, followthepipelines.com, you'll see some very interesting maps on Ukraine. The Russians control the pipelines that transit through Ukraine. And they, up till now, they're still sending natural gas through there because it was under contract. They have to make good on their contract before the war began. But those are aging pipelines, and the United States wants to develop alternative pipeline routes. And there have been efforts in the past that have succeeded. There's a pipeline that is called the BTC pipeline that was built during the, let's see, I think it was in the 1990s. And that runs from Baku through to, I can never pronounce it, Tbilisi, and ending up in Turkey and Seyhan. I have a map of that in my book. That was a way of avoiding Russia. And it's all these bypass efforts. You know, we're going to bypass Russia and Russia's going to bypass the US. And it's this incredible pipeline wars that are going on right now. So let's see, what else can I say about Ukraine? Why is Putin focusing on Eastern Ukraine? Because that is, yes, that is where most of the natural gas is. Okay, that is my opinion. And why seize Crimea earlier? Crimea sits in the Black Sea. The Black Sea is loaded with oil and natural gas. A lot of it is still not exploited. Russia has built 2 pipelines under the Black Sea. And the US doesn't like that at all. And by getting a hold of Crimea, they have even more access to the riches of the Black Sea. And I have a map in my book about that. So it really is. The other aspect is that the United States has been renewing its pumping of oil and natural gas as a result of the war in Ukraine, because they're worried that Russia will shut off the gas supplies to Europe. So that you got to find alternatives. And the fracked gas people, these tend to be more the smaller oil and natural gas companies. These are not the majors. They have been pining to get in to that whole region of Eastern Europe. They were pining to get into Afghanistan too, and Iraq. And Dick Cheney was one of the main people to do that. Dick Cheney is the vice president to Bush, was surveying the whole region, the Caspian, and also he was looking at Ukraine. And interestingly enough, Victoria Nuland, who is
that
today,
caught in Ukraine, yeah.
Oh, you know about her?
Of course, in Ukraine, she's one of the ones who sort of created sort of a malaise between, I think she got caught by the Russians, if I'm mistaken, saying some untoward things on her cell, right?
It got leaked. They were talking about who they were going to replace as the what Russian president, pro-Russian president,
right,
was going to be replaced with. And that got on the phone. She was also seen handing out candy to the demonstrators against his regime. And she was very much in favor of a regime change. And she worked for Dick Cheney during the Iraq War years. And she's married to Robert Kagan, who's a key neoconservative. But I would say that it's not just the neoconservatives that have had their eyes on Ukraine. It's also, well, certainly Zbigniew Brzezinski, when he was Carter's national security advisor, he was looking through his concept of the grand chessboard which is a book he wrote about establishing American dominance in the world as a single superpower. And so he's a sort of a neoliberal. He comes out of the Rockefeller
They're all
camp.
neoliberals, the ones who run our country that provide. I mean, that's why whether it's Obama or it's Bush, our oil policy remains the same, and what we do overseas remain the same. One of the reasons I love having you on talking about this, and again, I don't want to be here giving misinformation about Russia, Ukraine, the United States, or anything. So I wanted somebody who actually knows what's going on. Your father was an ex-spy who worked on this, on all the things on towards or otherwise that's done by not only the United States, but by France, by UK, by Russia, by all of them. He knows all. He knows where all the dead bodies were, and you also have a lot of documentation to where the dead bodies were. Interestingly, let me tell you what I want. One of the reasons I wanted you here to let my audience see. We have these fights among Republicans and Democrats and all of that as if we are anywhere in the game, and we fight on their behalves of who to be the master or the control of entities, when the reality is they're all in one boat fighting with each other to get maximization of their profits, while we all, Mademoiselle Dennett and all of us, suffer for what they do when they play their big games. Would you agree with any of that I've said?
I certainly would agree with it. Sometimes there are differences within them. I consider the neoliberal Rockefeller camp as being more sophisticated, and they often rely more on economic pressure than going into a region with a sledgehammer. So I think that they may not have gone into Iraq the way the U.S. did
Under Bush.
so
Yeah.
blatantly. Bush was more allied with the neocons, and well, because of Cheney, of course. And they had been angling, as I said, these smaller ones. I mean, Bush, Zapata oil, that was minor league, but they saw riches to be made, and they just, went in full hog. The neoliberal camp is more sophisticated, generally speaking. But I want to return to Brzezinski. Guess who the U.S. ambassador to Poland is? It's his son.
His son, I
Okay,
know.
what's he doing there?
Well,
You have
he
to
has a
ask
name,
yourself.
right?
Yeah, and then I found this great quote from Henry Kissinger, who was a protege of Nelson Rockefeller, who I wrote about in a previous book.
Right.
And Kissinger said, if you control the oil, you control the world.
It's
So
true.
that's what it's all about. They may have differences of approaches, but it seems to me that it's all sort of come together with Ukraine. You got the neocons and the neoliberals sort of working together, it would seem to me. And the main goal is to weaken Russia. And I mean, Biden blew it. He said it.
Yes,
We
he
want
said it.
regime change. And then I
Here's
was
the
like,
thing.
no, it's not regime change. Come on. Who
Again,
knows they want to get rid of him? So
Miss Dennett, I think one of the reasons that we want every American understanding these stories as well is because it was amazing to me how quickly Biden asked for $33 billion after he had gotten $14 billion. He has no problems getting it from either Democrats or Republicans. But it goes a bit further. He asked for $33 billion and they said, no, no, Biden, you can have $40 billion
40 billion.
to give
Yeah.
them
Yeah.
to the Ukraine. And then you ask the question, wait a minute, aren't we having problems giving folks health care? Aren't our kids having problem paying their student debt? Aren't we having problems providing family leave for those who need to take care and protect families? But we can always find the money to do the things that Miss Dennett talks about, and that is fund the pipeline wars. Miss
Yeah.
Dennett, why don't you give me a closure that summarizes what we are actually seeing in this world and what we should, as an educated citizenry, try to mitigate going forward?
Well, we have to understand the role of pipeline politics and pipelines and oil in all the major conflicts in the world. and I have said that I see the war in Ukraine as becoming the mother of all energy wars if it further escalates, which it appears to be doing, and if we get into, God forbid, a nuclear confrontation. And so I can't emphasize enough the importance of developing alternative energy, moving away from fossil fuels. The Europeans are doing it. This war has scared the Jesus out of them.
Yeah,
They
the Germany doubled its defense budget too, right?
Yeah, and I mean, they're really worried. So they're still doing that. But in the US, certainly the independents and the gas frackers are making hay out of it, and drill baby drill is back. A lot of Biden's promises are going down the drain. You know, he's leasing public lands now to allow for drilling. You know, I don't think he wanted that necessarily, but the pressure of the energy companies is just enormous. So what we've got to do is further educate ourselves about this horrible role that oil has to do with war, let alone climate change. Okay, and then once we totally understand that, we've got to save the planet, and we've got to just do everything we can for future generations to get off fossil fuels. I think there will be fewer wars if that happens. Look what's happening today. The market's down 1,000, right? And it's because, as we were speaking, it's because of this war in Ukraine. They're starting to get worried, and it's a very serious situation. So I appreciate your allowing me to expound on my geopolitical analysis here.
Charlotte Dennett. We need more Charlotte Dennetts out there telling the true story. Too often we rely on news bites that don't really go into detail, and people are easily fooled by the misinformation, both by the neoliberals and the neocons. So I thank you so kindly, Charlotte Dennett, for having been on Politics Done Right.
Well, thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
I'm Egberto Willies, as host of Politics Done Right, a progressive radio media show on Pacifica Network's KPFT 90.1 FM Houston that engages all ideologies. I found that our political angst isn't mostly ideological. There is a well-designed effort by many in power to control us. If we are at each other's throats, we are less likely to demand our economic and local wishes. In that light, I wrote 3 books. I wrote the first one titled, As I See It, Class Warfare, the Only Resort to Right-Wing Doom, to describe the entire economy in a manner we can all understand. It highlights why it was designed to pilfer most as it empowers a few, the chosen. The second book, titled, It's Worth It, How to Talk to Your Right-Wing Relatives, Friends, and Neighbors, take it to the next level. After understanding how the system pilfers, it is incumbent that we can speak to our peers to empower a change. The third book, How to Make America Utopia, Take Away the Economy from Those Who Rigged It, gives us a place to land. After learning about our economy that is dysfunctional for most and learning how to engage the other side, we point out what would make an economy that works for all. Each book stands on its own, but together they provide the full picture. Please consider getting one or more. You will undoubtedly learn, be entertained, and help us continue the mission with our blogs, articles, videos, and books. I hope you enjoyed that, folks. Charlotte is a wonderful guest. She knows the material. She wrote the book. Got to check it out. I put the book link in there as well. But please consider getting my books, all 3 of them if you can. But each one of them, like I said, stand alone. You can go to politicsandright.com/books, politicsandright.com/books. Please support the program. If you are on YouTube right now, please go ahead and click that join button. Be a part of our YouTube PDR posse. Go ahead and give us a coffee or something like that, because that is how we can effectively make change, by informing people. A lot of this information, the media doesn't give these people enough time, enough traction that they can tell the whole story. Instead, we hear a soundbite here, a soundbite there. Well, that's why you have Politics Done Right, so that you hear more than sound bites. Please go ahead and click that join button if you are on YouTube. But if you're not on YouTube, to join, you can still join the YouTube posse by going ahead and clicking politicsandright.com/YouTube, politicsandright.com/YouTube. Alternatively, you can support us on our Patreon. Some people like to use the Patreon platform. You can go to politicsandright.com/Patreon, politicsandright.com/Patreon alternatively, but actually preferably because we get the best rates there, consider providing us our support on politicsandright.com/PayPal, politicsandright.com/PayPal. Everybody knows how to spell PayPal, P-A-Y-P-A-L, right? Politicsandright.com/PayPal. All right, folks, we have a store. Our store has a whole lot of, I don't have the stuff to show you here because I'm not in Houston, but we have the caps, we have the cups, we have all the good stuff for you. The t-shirts that have, like this one that I'm wearing right now that says, I support, what does this one say? It says, I support independent media. I support independent media. Please consider going to our store and show your support for independent media. Get our logo on it as well. Please go ahead and there we go, politicsandright.com/store, politicsandright.com/store. Now, if you want to find all the area, oh, there we go. Made a large pic for the mug. I got to give it to Bridge MCP. She made a picture of what one of our mugs said. Let me go ahead and get the clip for that mug as well. Let's go ahead and put Bridge's picture on the screen. There you go. Bridge is reminding us that that is what's actually on the mug that she designed for us. Join the PDR posse. Folks, let me go ahead and put the link to that mug in the screen right now. If you go right, para ver, ahí mismo está. If you go right there, that's the link to get the mug that has that printed on it with our logo as well. Please consider getting that. Help support what we're doing here. Let me just tell you, it's not cheap. It has rated just about everything that I put away to come ahead and do this. I mean, well, that's for another day. That story is for another day. Anyhow, let's see what else we got to tell you. Please, there is a catch-all for all of our different ways of supporting us, meaning Cash App, Venmo, what's the other one? Zelly, or however you say that, plus all these other options. I have all those different links inside of this one link here called politicsandright.com/support. If you can find any way to support this program to ensure we can continue to give the truth, to also make sure that we counteract all that misinformation, not only coming from the right, but coming from the foreign groups that would like to influence our elections, etc., etc., etc. Okay, I have another video for you, but before, let me go ahead and check to see what you guys have been saying. I've been looking through, and you guys have been doing a great conversation among yourselves. I love it. The shortages may last another 2 to 4 months, even as lawmakers and the White House try to increase supplies. Abbott said it will take 6 to 8 weeks to get the formula. And the reason I read that one is to remind you guys of something very, very important, right? This is a failure of the for-profit, greedy capitalist system. Here's the funny part about it. Those people who hate government, they don't want government to do anything. We have a company that just about poisoned kids with having bacteria in their supply. It wasn't the government that did it. They did it. And who are they asking to come to the rescue? You listen to the media. What is the Biden administration doing? Does the Biden administration need to have a supply of milk? Because if they're saying the Biden administration should have a supply of Similac and all these different brands I'm not saying they shouldn't. I'm just saying. But what they're proving is that the private sector, because it's for profit base in these things that are essential. Remember, I believe in free enterprise, but I think in things that are essential or critical, the government should be strongly involved. What we have proven here is when these companies run into trouble, the first thing they beg, oh, government, what are you doing? But I tell you what hurts me the most is when you have the media folks buying the right-wing folks and saying, well, why wasn't the government ready? Choose. Do you want the milk control by the private sector, or do you want to have the milk's flow controlled by the government where you can get true reliability? Again, the reliability from the private sector says what again? Oh, we have a monopoly. We created these processes that reduce costs, and we poisoned your kid. And when we poison your kid, we say, government, can you help us? What is the government doing? Why aren't you finding the milk? Why aren't you feeding our kids? Well, you're the guys who are always talking about you want the government out. Now you're begging the government to come in. Now you're begging the government to do all kinds of things. It is the sheer, it is not only hypocrisy, it is limited thinking. And that is where I really want to say it is limited thinking to think that. Okay, whose failure was it when the citizens of the USSR are greeted with empty shelves at the grocery store? That has nothing to do with this story here. Like I've said before, it is simple. A bifurcated economy where things that are not essential are controlled by the private sector and things that are essential are controlled by we the people, a well-designed we the people. Again, we have proven that whenever the private sector fails, they are always begging government to somehow come to the rescue. Whenever a hurricane blows down all those homes that are built silly on lands that should not have homes, then they beg the federal government to come to their rescue. The federal government continuously come to the rescue of the private sector because the private sector have proven on and on again to be nothing more than parasites. I'm not talking about I'm not talking about the pizza shop. I'm not talking about the grocery store. Those people work for their money. I'm talking about the Wall Street guys who, as soon as a profit margin drops by a few pennies, they want to make sure and take it away from the workers. They want to take it as inflate. They want to create inflation. The private the capitalist portion of the private sector are parasites that under our system never loses. Even now, what they're asking for is now Biden is going to go over to overseas and start flying in milk because the private sector failed in America. Again, were they able to deliver the milk successfully to the American people? No. What does that mean? They failed. It's that simple. There are no two ways about it. So all of you who are looking for unrestricted capitalism, as Brother Robin Davenport is saying, unrestricted capitalism is by design brutal. And why is it brutal? Because it's only looking to serve one. Patricia Vadala says, to many places to inspect, not enough inspectors. That too, they want to cripple. That's what they want. That's what they want. Michael Rudnick, government is one of the three bastions against unchecked corporate power screwing the people. P.S. The other two, it scrolled across, it scrolled across, it scrolled across. Okay, let's continue. Egberto Willis, I forget, is in PayPal business or friend? PayPal is a friend. PayPal is a business, but it's a friend to me because they charge the least amount of, in other words, they take the least amount off the top from whenever folks contribute to politics done right, they're the ones that take the least at this point in time. All the others take a bigger cut. I guess I don't know what their reasons are really, but they do. Let's see. Of course, the best the ones that take absolutely no cut, of course, is when you do Zelle Cash App or what's the other one? Venmo. So there you go. Let's see what else we got here. Al Gore won Florida. We knew that. Charlotte thinks that we should get a 40K EV. And just how does she think the power to change those vehicles come from? It'll come from a multitude of avenues, Mr. Eric Hayes. But you know what? The good let me explain some, and I'm glad that Eric put that statement in there because it gives us a chance to educate folk that are misinformed by the right. Because here's what the right says about EVs, right? You go ahead and buy yourself an electric car. And you foolish people don't understand that to power the electric car requires electricity, and that electricity is made with coal. That electricity is made with oil. Electricity is made with natural gas, all which is true. Here's a part of the story they don't tell you. As we go further into green energy, more coal plants shut down and more green plants, meaning solar, wind, wave, hydro, come online, right? But here's the kicker that they don't tell you. The great thing about having electric cars is it's what's known as an abstracting vehicle, okay? It does not emit into the air like every combustion engine does. And so what we do is if we have all electric, all the pollution comes from whatever still is generating electricity, the dirty plants, right? So we have all the cars off the road that are using fossil fuel, and we slowly change these power generation plants to renewables. So this is abstracting because we get the immediate bang now from the electric cars. And as we change the forms of generating energy to create the same electricity that these cars need, we continuously reduce our carbon footprint. So we reduce our carbon footprint immediately from driving cars that are electric, and we also reduce our carbon footprint as we migrate from carbon, meaning from coal, to wave, hydro. Actually, there are even some biodiesels, etc. There are all kinds of ways that we are actually following the curve, right? And so, again, remember what the right does to its people is they tell them a true story on the top that beneath is hollow. And then we have those who don't do deeper thinking start to parrot those stories, and then it gets a life of its own. What politics done right does, what we do, our job, why we ask for your support to make sure that the misinformation that Eric Hayes just put there about, oh, you want to buy a car now, an e-car, and you still are generating dirty energy from the electricity, we can then educate them to get the method in their minds. It's not about the e-car takes that carbon in that area offline immediately as the power plants switch over from dirty energy to clean energy. Those cars have already done their part of the job. It just takes one other level of thinking. Get away from your ideological buffoonery. One more level of thinking, and you get the picture. Now, some of my right wingers will refuse to accept or believe that, but it doesn't matter because all those that are listening to our live show, our podcast, and etc., we are using that great stuff from Eric, that great, well-designed misinformation from Eric, and we can enlighten others who think like Eric and others, but are willing to have their thought process change into one that actually thinks scientifically, that thinks correctly. All right, let's continue. Let's see what else I got down here. Let's see. No, it is misinformation when you take it to the next step. It is like I said, it's a true statement on the top, but underneath it's ridiculous. Okay, E2247 says Robert Kagan, his brother Fred, Norman Reynolds says, and a switch to battery and solar and EV charge at home will not need any power from the grid. Very true. I love that one as well. The thing about renewables is that the pollution happens once or twice during mining and manufacturing, while fossil fuels, the pollution happens constantly. Result, fossil fuels account for 1 in every 5 deaths worldwide. Thank you for giving that intelligent piece of information. Reducing our, from AVQ, Robert Davenport says, reducing our carbon footprint is not eliminating it. It is doing that what can do better and less damage. Exactly, Brother Davenport. Who else do we have here that I want to? Paul Fleming says 203 Republicans voted against the domestic terrorism bill. I wonder why. You know why. British MCP says the Niagara Rivers is one of the world's greatest sources of hydroelectric power. The beauty of it is wild descent from the Lake Erie to Lake Ontario attracts millions of visitors each year. During its short course, 56 kilometers, the river drops 99 meters. That's a lot of potential energy. With much of the spectacular plunge concentrated at a 13-kilometer stretch of waterfalls and rapids. Yep, yep, yep. Mike C6 says, as more wind solar comes online, more natural gas plants have to come online to ramp up or down. I mean, that's not a problem. If you bring natural gas online for emergencies, in other words, if for some unforeseen reason we don't have sun, we don't have wind, I mean, I like note I said unforeseen, but again, it's wind, solar, back in store. Back in store means like you can use hydro, put water in lakes and all of that. Those are all batteries. Raise big heavy weights up that bring things down eventually. There are a lot of ways to store energy. in industrial capacities. That doesn't only require lithium batteries, that can use many others. There's a piece that I wanted to show you guys, but I guess I am going to hold it back until tomorrow since I only have 6 minutes with a whole lot more questions coming in or statements coming in. Daniel Edo says, Egberto, get to the next level of deeper thinking. If you are correct, how do you explain shortages in a system without corporations, capitalism, and completely controlled by a central government? Again, you're misinformed again. Capitalism wants you to believe that having things run by a government means centralized government, meaning the following. They would want you to believe that everything starts in, like the way Russia runs its army, everything runs from Russia, so it doesn't run efficiently, right? What we are speaking about is government. There's the federal government and then there's state governments, and things can be localized. Localized mean just like we have separation of powers right now in the way that the way we have the states run certain things. Let me give you a classic example. Medicare for all doesn't mean everything is run from Washington, D.C. Medicare for all means everybody qualifies for medicine. If in Timbuktu we need to have this type of health care, as long as it's paid for by all of us, you do that. If you go to Timbuktu, you have a different kind of stuff because of the way the people who live there. No, again, that fallacy about centralized care. Let me tell you what is centralized. Centralized is having four corporate beings that control our milk supply. That is centralized. Centralized is having four major oil company. That is centralized. Now, if you have all states that are supposed to give healthcare, we have 50 states and all the healthcare is paid through one payer. It's not centralized at all. It is optimized for where you're at. You see the lie, that is a lie that they tell you. And you see how easy it was for Daniel Ledo to eat it up? Look at what he says. Egberto, get to the next level of deeper thinking. If you are correct, how do you explain shortages in the system without corporations? Well, what you had is Russia was centralized communist country. What Egberto and all of us are talking about is a system in which it's not centralized. Okay? You think that there's one government? Come on, man. Wake up. Egberto is making an argument for Scudder striking down Roe versus Wade. Send it back to the states. No, you're missing the point. Again, why do I have to teach a born American citizen his own constitution? The Constitution created two parts. The Bill of Rights served a purpose, and it created the fear that one had for exactly that. That's something that said we are going to have the tyranny of the majority. To prevent the tyranny of the majority, what we created was a Bill of Rights. And again, the Constitution is a very poorly written document. Let me just say that. But at least having a Bill of Rights did something important. It created individual rights that the majority could not supersede. And the right to an abortion was one of those that was inferred from the privacy clause, etc. Right? And marriage among people of same-sex marriage and all that sort of stuff. So no, we want majority rule, but we don't want state rights that remove inalienable rights. Understand your constitution. Understand your government. Understand the formation of the country, which wasn't all that great. The insistence upon the U.S. exercising global primacy, or primacy continuing to be number one position we've become accustomed to having ever since the end of World War II. That conviction remains. Here you girl. Paul Fleming says you want tire privacy, but you don't want a woman to have hers. Exactly. Robert Davenport says democracy without a constitution is a tyranny of the current majority. Amen. Let's see what else we got. Daniel said Egberto is now making an argument in favor of the Second Amendment. Wow. I think you missed the ball if you think I make an argument against the Second. The argument that I'm making is that the Second Amendment, as implemented today, is not the Second Amendment as described by the founders of this country. But even if it were as described by the founders of this country, I don't have any particular faith in the founders of the country knowing today what we know today. It's not like they had scientific knowledge. It's not like they had They understood that we were that all humans are equal, and it's not that they understood that we were going to come to a point in time where the tyranny of capitalism that they stood for was going to come crashing down. Anyway, we are getting close to the end of the program. I'd like you all to consider becoming a part of our posse. Please go ahead and go to politicsdoneright.com/PayPal. Please go to politicsdoneright.com/PayPal. Support what we're doing. Yep, yeah, what we're doing here. Alternatively, you can just go to politicsdoneright.com, get one of our books. I promise you, you're going to learn a lot from our books. You're going to enjoy our books. Please also go to politicsdoneright.com/support. Politicsdoneright.com/support is the all-encompassing way to support what, whoops, let me get that done right, to support what we do here. Let me get a few more in before I go. Again, Egberto Willies, you don't and should not teaching them basic knowledge, giving medicine to the dead, feeding ego. Well, again, Breach, please hear me here, hear me, Breach. Other people are going to be reading this as it goes into podcasts. I have to make some sort of a mention to corroborate what we're saying here, because what they say is a bad info that's going to the right. When somebody comes to our show and hear that, we get a chance to mitigate it. I won't spend an inordinate amount of time, as you know, you've warned me before, and many others have warned me before. But I think we cannot. One of the things that Democrats have done for too long a time is to leave things unanswered. And what we created is a middle of the country that is completely ill-informed, because we just thought, how could they be so stupid to think that? And it's not that they're stupid at all. It is just that they have been left behind because we didn't communicate much to them, in my humble opinion. And I think we have a responsibility to treat folks. I think we have a responsibility. My responsibility is not to look at my right wing guys that don't think like me and just think that they're dumb. I don't think they're, I genuinely do. And this is not, I'm not just saying this. I genuinely don't think that they are. They just program some ways. I know some left wingers that are programmed with some silly information that I'm trying to break right now. There's a part of, when they talk about cancel culture, there's a part of cancel culture within our space, the left space. And I'm not talking about a cancel culture that exists on the right. I'm talking about a cancel culture that exists in our space that I'm trying to work with, because what it does is it requires a purity none of us can live up to. But that's for another day. Look, I thank you guys so kindly for being a part of the program. Together, and notice what I said, together we will make a difference. You will make a difference by helping us promote what we're talking here, truth, by helping us speak to everybody and making sure that nobody, even those that want to call you their enemies, do not make them your enemies. I don't believe in false equivalencies. I do not condone false equivalencies at all. Let's see, I have to remember the bigger picture. Thanks. Absolutely, my dear, beautiful lady. AC Rodriguez says, unfortunately, we have to consistently reinforce information for those that do not get it the first time. It's a constant battle, but must be fought. Thank you, brother. Thank you, brother. Okay, guys, you have a wonderful day. My name is Egberto Willies. This is Politics Done Right. And you guys know how I end this, baby. I am what? Out. We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead. Number one, subscribe to our channel, and number two, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.